Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be featuring the Ochakov, a new Tier 8 premium light Soviet cruiser. Keep in mind that you will be able to win an Ochakov just by subscribing and commenting below the video. There will be an example template in the pinned comment as always. You just type Ochakov giveaway, your in-game name and what server you play on, and there will be a drawing for an Ochakov being given away to some lucky winner. Starting off, the Ochakov. Well, the first thing that probably sticks out is the health pool on this ship. 30.2k health is incredibly squishy. It is beyond squishy, especially when you realize that the Ochakov has neither smoke nor heal. So you're sitting at 30.2k health with absolutely no way of sustaining yourself. And as you probably saw from the AA on that Lexington, your AA isn't exactly that impressive either. Your continuous DPS is okay, but the amount of flak you throw up is 3. Yes, that is the extent of all the flak you throw up. You have 3 flak explosions, 5.8 km range, 90% hit chance. So, obviously, if a carrier wants to strike you, especially if you're up-tiered, there is not a whole lot the Ochakov can do about it. The other issue with the Ochakov is the armor. It is essentially a Smolensk hull. Now, it does have some armor changes compared to the Smolensk, namely in the sense that the bow and the stern is 25mm, the upper belt is 25, and the deck armor is 27. This obviously means that 380mm guns have absolutely no issues citadeling you or overmatching you, and your deck armor can be overmatched by slightly larger calibers as well. More important is the fact though that you do have Smolensk large hull with 70mm plating on it, which obviously means cruisers citadel you ridiculously easy, even DDs citadel you, hell even Battleship HE can citadel you. So when it comes to squishiness, I don't really think there's any other cruiser at this tier that even comes close to Ochakov's squishiness. This thing is absolute paper. Absolute paper in every single way. And any sort of random chip damage, is it from a carrier, whatever, hell, if you end up hitting a torpedo, it's really gonna hurt you because you have no way of sustaining from it. The handling is pretty good. 35 knots, which, well, Russian cruisers tend to be quite fast. Turning circle is an okay 750. I say okay because even Baltimore has 730, and for example the Cleveland, which is also a light radar cruiser, has 660 meter turning circle. The Ochakov does have a 6.6 second rudder shift, which is pretty decent, and of course, as I mentioned, the speed. What does make the Ochakov stand out, what is kind of supposed to be its unique gimmick, is the concealment. The Ochakov is stupidly stealthy. 9.1 km surface detection and a 5.8 km air detection. Now, yeah, this is combined with the fact that it has a radar. The radar used to be 12 km, like the standard Soviet radars, but this was changed to a 10 km radar. This was nerfed. Even so, a 10 km radar means that you have a 900 meter stealth radar buffer. Stealth radar essentially means that if you get spotted, you can instantly radar, and the DD will be sitting inside your radar range. So you can basically just sail straight at, well, anything, and the second you get spotted, you can radar, and you will catch them in your radar. The upsides here are, for the DD that is, well, the radar only lasts 20 seconds, 24 if you're running the radar duration mod, as I am running right here. The guns are Chapayev guns. Very similar in performance to both penetration and shell travel time. However, there are some significant changes, namely the fact that your max range is a rather anemic 15.6. This was another thing that was changed. The range used to be 15.2, but they buffed it to 15.6. The main battery reload is 6.1. It used to be 6.5, but they buffed it to 6.1. Even then, when you compare it to something like Cleveland that has the same range, the same also 152mm guns with different ballistics though, but the Cleveland has 6.5 second reload, but it has 12 guns, compared to Ochakov's 6.1 second reload and 8 guns. Obviously, I don't need to tell you which of these two ships will be dominating in any sort of DPM contest here. The Ochakov damage output isn't really that impressive. In fact, the one thing the Ochakov really seems best at is killing DDs. This combination of fairly fast shells with fairly anemic range, questionable DPM, but then on the other hand, this very stealthy HUD and a hull and the ability to stealth radar made it very much feel like a DD hunter. That's really your specialization. The DPM isn't really impressive enough to farm battleships in any way better than something like a Cleveland or Mogami or Irian, Kutuzov, Chapai, basically any of these other light cruisers that are good at doing a lot of DPM because, well, you don't really feel to have quite the same extent, nor do you have the same range. You also most certainly don't have the tankiness to be able to open water gunboat, since you don't have the range to stay far enough to actually keep safe. So you seem to be a very specialized DD hunter. Fighting other cruisers is awkward because once again they tend to have both the DPM and the health advantage when it comes to fighting you. So and if you end up fighting something that has improved pen angles, then you're in some serious trouble with the Ochakov because, well, that Citadel is so very vulnerable. The question I have to ask: did the game really need another specialized anti-DD cruiser? I mean, we have a ton of radars, we have a ton of DD killers in the game already, and even more, did we really need a stealth radaring cruiser in the game? Not really. It does its job quite well though. You tend to catch people off guard. This is Asha had no idea I was here, and I just pop around the corner and catch him. I pop the Hydro and it actually reveals the Kutuzov behind him as well. You can see that the DPM, not that crazy. You do have torpedoes, 8 km range torpedoes. These things are actually pretty damn slow. These torpedoes are not going to win any real prizes when it comes to speed. They only do 56 knots, but they do hit for 15k, and they do have a 1.1 km concealment, so this Kutuzov has no idea they're sneaking up. Note that the Kutuzov loaded AP and took half my health. I was giving too much broadside, but you can see just, first of all, how vulnerable it is. The size of the Citadel and the vulnerability when even a light cruiser in any sort of brawl will absolutely punish you if you give too much broadside, as I did there. My torpedoes, however, were good, and with the combination of Citadels and torpedoes I did take him down, but it really did highlight the squishiness of this ship. That was not exactly the most impressive brawling ship. To be fair, I did miss playing giving so much broadside since I was stuck fighting the Asashio. But it really does highlight these issues. And when you're forced to kite away in situations like this, it's very terrifying. The Ismail luckily detonates. My AA somehow occasionally deals with the planes for long enough that I'm able to disengage without getting killed. So ultimately, the ship does well, or does quite decently when you're the same tier or higher tier. But when you get up tiered in the Ochakov, this thing becomes really awkward. The issues with the DPM means that, well, high tier gunboats like Kitakaze and stuff, and Kleber and Mogadors and things like this, well, they can just straight up outtrade you. They can just straight up gun you down if they're good. They are quite terrifying to fight. Like radaring a Kitakaze and then he starts shooting right back at you is actually a pretty terrifying experience when you consider how large you are, how much damage you take, and the fact that you have no real way of sustaining and your DPM is quite questionable. Add in that fighting any other cruisers is extremely awkward when you're up tiered, because all the other cruisers have a heal, you don't, and you're already losing in tankiness and in damage output against them. So the Ochakov is the very definition of extremely passive, extremely safe, hiding behind islands and lobbing shells. Basically what you've been seeing me do this game. This is the definition of the extremely cowardly safe cruiser. You hide behind islands, you lob shells from behind them, you hide in your teammates' smokes, you have a very low smoke firing penalty, and in general you avoid any sort of open water fights, any sort of open water gunboats, except for when you go dark and you try to ambush DDs with your radar. Is it the most fun gameplay? No. In general, I don't think the Ochakov really is a very fulfilling cruiser experience. In fact, I think the Cleveland fulfills many of the same roles, except that thing is also significantly tankier and does more damage and is just more fun to play since it also has a lot of AA on top of it. I think the Mogami is also more enjoyable. Ultimately, the Ochakov, I feel like it fills a niche that was kind of already saturated. We don't need more ships that can take down DDs. DDs are already, like, we don't need specialized anti-DD killing ships. There's plenty of issues for the DDs to deal with. Other DDs, rocket planes, all the radars across the board, all the hydras, like, they have issues everywhere. So adding a stealth radaring, highly specialized niche cruiser that is especially good against them, yeah, I'm not really seeing the need. Fleeing from King George, because if he decides to start shooting HE, he can absolutely citadel me. My 25mm plating does allow me to bounce his AP as long as I remain angled, but I'm playing this extremely safe because with that 8k health, it really doesn't take much to kill me at this point. With the lack of sustain, the lack of smoke, Ochakov is a passive experience, to put it lightly. And this is a polar opposite of the Bagration. That's another ship that I will be featuring. The Bagration is very much a super tanky aggressive monster that I've enjoyed playing significantly more, but the Ochakov seems like a complete polar opposite. Do I think that this ship could be strong? Especially in some sort of tier 8 ranked, I can absolutely see this ship being quite effective because, well, it's pretty damn good at just straight up catching DDs off guard and allowing your team to wreck them. But as a gaming experience, I don't think it's particularly fun. And as a DD playing against this thing, I think it's horrendously unfun. Stealth radar as a concept is terrible, because it completely nullifies the option for counterplay for the enemy DD. Normally, you can play around radars by knowing where the enemy ship is, but if he has the capacity to stealth radar, if he does remain undetected, when you actually spot him is when he's already within gun range and radar you. Not a fun experience to fight against, and I thought Wargaming was moving away from it. Running IFHE in case you're wondering of the damage on the Ashitaka. Sadly, I do not manage to get my Krok and 5th kill. And this game looks like it will be ending with me hanging on by a thread and surviving until the end of this match. Ochakov does not get my recommendation as a ship to buy. I don't think this ship is particularly enjoyable. I don't think it adds really anything to the game. I think many of the roles you fulfill in this ship can be better fulfilled in other ships, namely Chapayev, already stealth radar, but also a very good long-range gunboat, very good at farming other battleships, even tankier. When you see a Chapayev is tankier, that says a lot about the Chapayev, doesn't it? Alternatively, the Cleveland, also a more close-range experience than the Chapayev, but also fulfills all these roles better. The Ochakov, very, very niche, extremely specialized at one kill and one thing, and that's ambushing DDs at close range, but struggles extremely hard when up-tiered. Because, well, even the DDs can just straight up outgun. I wouldn't even want to fight the Haraguma in this thing. I'm pretty sure Haraguma would just melt this in a straight up 1 versus 1. Like, it wouldn't even be a close fight. 129k damage, 4 kills, 17 plane shots down, 2 citadels, 2 torpedo hits. Team score wise, 2.4k. Once again, this was a game where I was top tier. When you have games where you're up tiered and you have to actively play around all these scary ships in this thin Smolensk hull with no smoke, no heal, and even less health, yeah, that's an experience. Trust me on that. Is this ship beginner friendly? Absolutely not. The ship is extremely punishing, and new players will find themselves exploding very, very quickly. In fact, when you consider that the health pool is so low that most battleships only need 2 citadels to actually devastate you, it does put things into perspective. If you hit a Shimakaze torpedo in this thing, you're down to like 20% health afterwards. That's really how squishy this thing is. Detailed report wise, well, AA defense, 41k. He flew a lot of planes around in my range, but ultimately, as mentioned, we really only shot down 17 of these. Note that this was a tier 8 carrier that didn't really put much effort into dodging any of the flak or anything similar. Once again, up tiered, you're a very juicy target. Well, you're kind of like a DD for a carrier. Just go in and blap. A bit of AP, mostly HE, that's what you're going to find yourself spamming the most. Some fires, not really the best fire starter, especially if you spec IFHE to get past that. Base pen is 30mm, so you spec it to get 37mm of pen. That leaves your fire chance at 8%, provided you spec Demolition Expert. However, with flags you can add a few percent there, but ultimately not really the most impressive fire starter. Once again, there are better ships at this, at the very same tier, and even ships you can just get from the tech tree. Let me show you guys my recommended build, as well as the armor scheme of the ship, to give you guys an idea of just how squishy this thing is. Right, starting off, let me show you guys the armor, since I did talk about it a fair bit. 25mm, 25 upper belt, and 25 stern. Standard light cruiser setup with a 27mm deck armor. The thing that of course makes it stand out is this huge citadel with only 70mm of plating, which means very, very easy to hit from every possible angle. If you compare it to something like the Cleveland Citadel, which just barely peaks above the waterline at the very center of the ship, it does, and then you consider that the Cleveland also has, what, 20% more health. It really does put Ochakov's vulnerabilities into perspective. This is not an easy to play and a very squishy cruiser to play. No torpedo belt as well, so keep that in mind. As mentioned, a Shimakaze 24k torpedo will leave you with 6k health if you eat it midships. Ideally, of course, you should never eat the torpedo, but just giving you a heads up. In fact, Holland can kill you with 3 torpedoes. It really is something else. Consumable wise, not much to talk about. I would say premium radar, hydro, defensive AA, in that order. AA, as mentioned, you only have 3 flak that you can throw up. Your continuous mid-range is pretty good, and you got 4 km of it, and with sector reinforcement and defensive AA, it does do some decent work, provided it gets time to do so. But once again, tier 10 planes will not care much for this. The advantage is that because of your great concealment, they do have to fly into your flak to spot you, so they will always be paying the price for it. Upgrade-wise, turret survival, improved radar duration. If you don't have improved radar duration, run hydro or engine room protection, because as mentioned, this vulnerable huge citadel and also the rudder is quite squishy, means that this thing tends to lose engine and rudder a fair bit. Better dispersion, because none of the others are really worth slotting. Faster rudder shift, because the base rudder shift is pretty questionable. To be fair, you can also run the propulsion mod, for the simple reason that you get away with an 8.2 second rudder, and you do spend a fair bit of time sitting in smokes and behind islands spamming HE, so being able to quickly accelerate away isn't necessarily a bad choice either. Ultimately, this upgrade depends on your play style. And finally, 5th slot, concealment. Your gimmick is stealth radar, make sure you make use of it. Captain build wise, priority target, adrenaline rush, demolition expert, and I would say concealment expert first. After that, build IFHE for that continuous DPM boost, and then build a last stand. The last 3 points, honestly, there wasn't much to spend it on. You don't have a heal, so Superintendent is obviously not as valuable as it would be on a ship that has heal. But you do get an additional radar, and since they are quite short duration, you tend to work through them quite quickly. I didn't honestly consider much else to spend these points on. The other alternative is Jack of all trade and preventive maintenance. Alternatively, you could maybe go for some skip Superintendent, skip last stand, go for radio location plus preventive maintenance builds. These are all options. Ultimately though, I don't find radio location necessary, because capacitive stealth radar means that, well, you kind of always have the upper hand when it comes to detection against a destroyer. Basic flags. What's the mount recommended? Oh, the mount recommended is actually pretty damn optimal. That's exactly what you want to run. I would probably mix in an AA flag in there, just in case, because you are so squishy and you have such a hard time sustaining. Anything you can do to mitigate carrier strikes on you is highly, highly valued. Anyway, that was my Ochakov commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Good luck to you, the guys taking part in the giveaway, and I will see you guys next time.